With over 20 years of experience, Alan is a seasoned personal trainer and strength coach who has trained under some of the world's most elite coaches. Known for his personalized and practical approach, Alan specializes in empowering individuals, particularly those with health challenges, to achieve exceptional results and reach their full potential. His evidence-based training methods ensure that every client receives top quality instruction tailored to their unique needs. So let's welcome Alan this morning as he shares his insight on fitness and health strategies that support amyloid patients. So can we give a round of applause to Alan?
Thank you very much. Could we also please give Jamie a huge round of applause for organising this whole event? It's a privilege to be here, and she's done an amazing job. Thank you. So, yes, I've been a strength coach for 20 years, 10 years of which have been training Vince Nicholas, who many of you may know. He's a very firm advocate for amyloidosis in England. And it's been my privilege to work with him alongside during that period. So I've been tasked to condense that 20 years into half an hour, 45 minutes. So bear with me, strap yourselves in and get ready for the ride. To begin with, I want to just go through the primary areas that amyloidosis affects and in regards to strength training, so that you can start to see how specifically we need to address these various areas, because we don't want a generic system. We want something that is tailored towards things like peripheral neuropathy, the cardiac aspect of amyloidosis, the difficulty that some people have with walking. That can be either muscle wastage or due to peripheral neuropathy. The sensory nerves, once again, it's things like grip strength and dexterity can be lost. And the musculoskeletal system, obviously, we're looking at that in depth today. So we're going to be looking at ways to retain muscle mass in a very, very straightforward way. I'm going to be sharing techniques with you that are very, very rare, actually, very rarely known, that come from the Soviet Union previously, and how that can pertain to strength training. And really easy and very, very straightforward measures that you can all take today that are very, very straightforward. Okay, so we're also going to look at orthostatic issues. For example, you have this orthostatic hypotension where people stand up and suddenly feel very dizzy. And I'm going to give some suggestions how you can moderate your exercise to accommodate that as well. So that, you should, by the end of the session, have a very holistic idea how to make your own unique program, because it's going to be as unique as your own amyloidosis journey. So everybody will be at different ways along that particular path. And so hopefully I'll give you structure that you can use for all of that. Another thing, I'm happy to take in the Q&A any questions. If I talk too quickly, this is why I limited the coffee I was having, because this is me slowing down. Everybody's like, whoa. Then please throw something at me if I'm talking too quickly. Ideally soft, soft furnishing. Nothing too hard. I don't need concussion on top of jet lag. So, right, strength training, in a nutshell, will help you with every aspect of your life. I will say that again. I am a firm advocate of that. It will help you with every aspect of your life and make your life more fulfilling and better in every respect. So we'll move on. I'm going to skip this page because we're going to cover all of that in greater detail. The first thing is, obviously, it will make you stronger. That's day-to-day activities, whether it is anything from pushing a stroller, a lawnmower, pushing a heavy door, opening and closing cupboards, getting up off a sofa or toilet seat, wherever you are in terms of your own personal strength levels. Some of you might be going to the gym. Some of you, it's probably your vision of hell. But wherever you are, and trust me, I train a lot of people whose in that it's their vision of hell. Wherever you are on that paradigm, you want to be able to be stronger, because, my logo is Get Stronger, Live Longer, and I stand by that. Strength is a skill. And a skill is only learned through repetition. And you're going to hear a lot of that from me today. So you have to repeat this as a skill. And it's also the primary thing that we lose in life, okay? As we get older, it doesn't matter. Forget amyloidosis for a moment. Just the aging process, you will lose strength, okay? So I have a personal preference for that over and above other modalities of training, because it's the thing that we're going to lose. And we're going to lose things like bone mass. There's going to be osteoporosis, osteopenia, arthritic conditions. All of these can be improved, offset, or avoided altogether by strength training. Okay, so we've got increased bone density, the thickness of the bone, and that is going to help you with falls. You know, if you trip and hit yourself, you're not going to be so prone to a bone break. Improved insulin sensitivity. That's just a flash way of saying, if just by a show of hands, does anybody have type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes? Just so I know whether. Okay, so it will help with basically your insulin management. Is it type 1 or type 2? 2. Okay, so that's reversible with good nutrition and the right exercise. But what it does is it just gives a parking bay for all the traffic, which is glycogen flowing around the car park of your body. It gives you a parking bay to park that energy in. So it's very good for insulin management. Improved neural efficiency. That sounds really cool. Basically, it's just the velocity from your brain to your muscle. Okay, it's the speed, what we call that central nervous system. You're training the central nervous system. And that will help with more explosive movements, with having to move faster. And it will help with that mind-muscle connection. And improved economy of movement. When you're stronger, you move faster. You know, I remember the old Ricky Gervais joke where he's like, you know you're getting old because you get out of the sofa and you're like, oh! You have to make a noise to get out of the sofa. You know, that is a point when you realize that there's a lack and a degradation of strength. Okay. I just realized there are about 37 slides and I've got about a minute a slide. Let's go. All right. So we're going to skip over this because I've just discussed a lot of this, but improved circulation, improved heart function. Now, one thing I want to say regarding that is I'm not going to make any particular recommendations regarding cardiovascular training, because if you have cardiac myopathies with amyloidosis, you'd want to go with your healthcare practitioner's recommendations. He may say you don't want to have a heart rate over X amount. I would probably say, as a rule of thumb, 120 beats per minute is a pretty safe level, a kind of brisk walk, and maybe getting a fitness tracker and looking at how many steps you're doing a day is a good way of keeping up your fitness. You don't have to, just ask Vince. I've never got him on the treadmill in my life, and he'll probably punch me in the head if I did. But the point is, you don't need to be necessarily pushing yourself on the bike or whatever. Just do the things that you love. Walking the dog, going for a walk out in nature would be, I would argue, sufficient to maintain or even improve your cardiac output, rather than having to really push yourself, because it may be potentially dangerous. And improve blood pressure control. So better quality of life. You have improved life satisfaction. It's been demonstrably proved on a number of occasions that strength training and exercise generally is very good for mental health. It is, I think that's a given. It improves dopamine function in the brain, and it just improves people's sense of themselves as well. You know, when you feel strong or, you have good stamina, you feel better in yourself. Better physical function, obviously. It'd be a bit worrying if it wasn't. I've been doing this exercise for years and I'm weaker than ever. So, this is the summary. And this is the crux of what I really want to talk about today. It's the quality of life. I can dazzle you with all the modalities and this and that. These protocols will improve the quality of your life. And after all, that is the most important thing. That's the thing that we really want to be looking at. So, boost muscle strength, improved endurance, increased bone density, improved insulin sensitivity, all the things that we've talked about. But let's go to the more important aspect. Reduce risk of additional health issues. More able to manage your daily activities, maintaining independence, reduce risk of falls and injury, improved mood, increased life satisfaction. I think everybody can agree those are all good things. So they're all things that we want to work towards. To give you a practical example of the importance of strength training, Vince recently had his 10-year checkup, and they look at a whole load of things like blood pressure, and they looked at his lean muscle mass, and they said, you've lost no lean muscle mass in 10 years. And I said, that's incredible. That's absolutely amazing, because we all, like I said earlier, we all do. So the fact that he's been able to, in the face of an illness that will degrade that muscle strength and all the cardiomyopathies, etc., in the face of all that, he's maintained his strength. And I would argue, actually, training him, he's improved it. The stuff that we did on the last training session, I just looked at it and I was like, we couldn't have done this 5-6 years ago. He's progressed so far. And on another practical level, how do these things work day to day? What are the benefits of strength training for you? I'll give you a practical example. I stepped on the plane over here, and there was an elderly lady, very frail, struggling to get the luggage up into the overhead locker. So I did what any self-respecting personal trainer would do. I strode over to her, pushed her out of the way, vaulted into my seat, put my legs up, and ordered some food. No, of course I helped her put the bag up. But the key to that story was she said to me, God, you made that look easy. That's what I want for all of you, is that day-to-day activities, which you may have found difficult in the past, now will not present themselves as so difficult. And you know, don't have to think about, oh, you know, 1 rep max on your bench press. I'm talking about getting your shopping out of the car and not thinking, oh, I've got to go back again. You know, you can get both bags in one go. Or, you know, gardening, all of these day-to-day activities that a lot of people outside will take for granted, that can really be fatiguing and really problematic for people who have got dizziness or hypertension, etc. These training protocols I'll give you will really improve that. Anyway, I'm just mindful I need to zip along a little bit. So staying safe, obviously, you know, that's a given. What we want to look at personally is, I would say, probably in regards to the cardiac aspect of amyloidosis, you may want to get some recommendations there, because you don't want to be pushing yourself too hard. In terms of the exercises that I'm going to recommend, they're all very, very safe and effective. So, I'm happy at the end when we do the Q&A, if you say, well, I can't do that, that's no problem at all. I'll give you some sort of adaptation that you can use so that you don't feel that it's exclusory to other people. Talking to a healthcare practitioner, I think one of the big issues, and talking to people here has really shocked me, is the difference in the care given to people with amyloidosis here. There's no consistency across the world. There's no consistency. You know, there's so many therapies that are available in one country that aren't in another. And the reason I'm here, and it didn't take me 5 seconds to reach the decision to come over, is because there's a dearth of trainers who are really qualified to talk about this, which is really sad. But it's by part because it's a rare illness and disease, but also it just means that it's not something that's being looked at. And I think that's a real shame, and something that, you know, we need to address. And certainly from my part, I'm happy to help with that. So once again, we'll move over this because we've discussed this, but you know, peripheral neuropathy is an issue. Dizziness can be an issue. With dizziness, when I'm working with Vince, some days I'll just open the door and he'll say, oh, I'm really struggling today. I'm a bit all over the place. And we'll do things like Tai Chi, or we'll do some balance work. So that's where the personalization, it really comes in. And I haven't got time, unfortunately, to go through all of that. But that's where speaking to a healthcare practitioner can really be beneficial. And also you need to integrate these things as well. So in other words, you don't want to be pushing through moments when you feel particularly dizzy. Where it will help is that if you are very weak, for example, the legs feel very weak, if you're strong, but the central nervous system is not functioning, you're still in a better position. Because let's say you trip and you manage to deaccelerate. That's a lot of what I train, is deaccelerating movement under inertia. If you're strong, you're able to slow that down. I had an elderly client who once said to me, she took a trip and she literally went into this lunge like that and stopped herself. She said that was a broken hip. End of story. But she said, I managed to just halt myself in my progress. So that's what we're training. Even in the face of dizziness, etc., you're still able to exercise that motor control. Exercise considerations for those with who've had chemotherapy. I'm not going to go over. I'm going to talk about it as a strength coach. If you came to me having had chemotherapy, I would be working very, very low reps. I'll be giving you a lot of rest. A lot of rest. We're doing an exercise. You're sitting down for 2 or 3 minutes and then recouping. Oh yeah, you know, we're not going to rush. Where there's gastrointestinal distress and discomfort, I'm not getting you to do an exercise lying on your stomach. You know, bowel changes. You've got to be, as a PT, you've got to be mindful of that. If somebody's like, you know, saying, "Oh, my stomach's," you don't want to do things with a lot of intra-abdominal pressure. With, there's a lot of tensioning. Taste and smell is not really relevant to training, but anemia, you've got to be mindful of as well, that you're not pushing people too far. And the good thing with strength training is it really takes that into consideration. Watching your body signs and symptoms. Just give me a hands up if you've got a Fitbit or a smartwatch. Okay, yeah. So on these, they're ideal because they really can help you get an insight into where your body's at. There's something called, I think if you've got a Garmin, it's called a body battery or HRV. These are measures of how you're recovering. And you can start to tailor your exercise. You might wake up and go, oof, I didn't sleep very well. I'm speaking for myself here. And your HRV will go right down. That's probably not a day to push yourself too hard. Then there'll be other days where you're going to be really feeling great, and you can tailor the exercise appropriately, if that makes sense. Great question, thank you. That's heart rate variability. Sorry, if I do veer into verbiage, once again, throw something at me. Basically, if you think of your heart rate as 1 beat per minute, one beat per minute, that would be boring. 1 beat per second even. So it's not particularly regular. Some will be slightly faster, some will be slightly slower. So you're not actually getting 60 beats, exactly the same metronomic kind of value. The more balanced that beat is, the more balanced your autonomic nervous system is. Okay, your parasympathetic, think slowing you down like a parachute, and your sympathetic, which is like get up and go. The balance between those is your recoverability. So that's HRV in a nutshell, and it's just a very good measure. It's what I work with clients. So when they come in and go, oh, I'm really not feeling it, I'm like, let me see your HRV. And then I go, oh, you are feeling it? Now get back under the bench press. So it also gets them out of, I mean, ultimately, we all know our bodies better than anybody else. So, that is the final mechanism that you want to trust. Some people will have... these discrepancies with their heart rate variability that might throw things off. Yeah. Fitting exercises to everybody's level. I'm going to move quickly over this because if I was training all of you, I'd be doing a movement screen. I'll be seeing how, Melinda moves, how does she squat, how does she do an overhead press, for example, and I'd be putting a program together based on that. That's something that is a little bit more bespoke. So now we're getting to the meat and potatoes. First, the goal that you want to have is to make this smart, okay? Everybody's probably familiar with that. You want it specific, you want it measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-framed. What we're looking for there, I would say, is make the goal specific in terms of you, not something kind of abstract that you read in Men's Health. Oh, I find it really, I get up to the top of the stairs and I've got to take a few breaths. That's your measure, okay? It doesn't have to be anything super sophisticated. I can bike ride for about 5K, but 5K, I'm just wiped. That's your measure. Oh, just getting the shopping bags out, and then I have to put them down because my grip starts to go. There's your measure. Make it unique to yourself. Then you know that you're improving. Don't worry about anybody else. This is about, making it individualized. So using that framework, and also one of the things I'm always keen on is don't give yourself a massive long time frame because nothing will get done. You really, do you know what I mean? The amount of times I get people, as a PT, it'll be great when they sit down and you go, well, what's your time frame? I don't know. Years? You're like, no, that would be great for my business model, but it's not very ethical. So I'll just say to them, no, we're going to keep it to 12 weeks because if in 12 weeks you haven't noticed a difference in what I'm doing, sack me. I'm not doing my job. And track progress. There's a load of research out there that can absolutely unequivocally shows that monitoring these things, tracking progress, talking to friends, saying, oh, did you know I did this the other day and I couldn't do it before? All of these things really keep you on track, okay? Don't make it abstract. My mentor was Charles Poliquin, the world's most successful Olympic coach, and he had a great saying. He said, the faintest of inks is better than the strongest of memories. Just write it down. You don't have to have a flash log. Just monitor it. Oh, today I did 12 push-ups on the stairs. Last week I could only do 4 or 8. Do you see what I mean? So, because it's very difficult. It gets very muddly. You suddenly think, oh, I've always been able to do this. No, you haven't. I'll come back to clients and say, do you remember when you can do 3 of these? And they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. Keep a monitor because you'll regret it if you don't, trust me. It's like those before and after photos, where somebody's like, I never take them and then I regret them afterwards when somebody's like 8% body fat. I think, why didn't I take a photo when you were 32? But that's just me. Okay. Choosing appropriate exercises. I'm going to whiz through this because that's what we're going to go through. Strength training, we've discussed all the benefits of that. Please feel free to pick me up on anything that you're not sure of at the end. Right. This is very important. So if you want to take notes or you're sort of like, which bits should I really be paying attention to? This is important. There are these set of key movement patterns that need to be in every program to some extent. You can do them all in one day. That would be considered a whole body workout. Or you can have them spread out over the week. But this is very, very key. So it's, so 6 modalities. Carry is one of the ones that I've added in. Not all strength coaches put that in, but I thought it's particularly relevant to amyloidosis. So we've got every program needs to have some sort of pull exercise. My personal recommendation is make it a horizontal pull. What do I mean by that? There are two types of pull. There's one like this, and there's one like this. The second one, the horizontal one, is more for the muscles of the mid-shoulders. Now, if you have this, low blood pressure with amyloidosis, one of the things that will happen is often people stand like this because their head comes forward, because when they raise it, they feel a little bit dizzy. So I would recommend then the posture starts to lag, your shoulders roll in, you're more at risk of a shoulder injury. So having some sort of pull exercise is absolutely essential. And we're going to go through these. I'm going to actually show you practical ones. And I know that Jamie, I spent probably about a couple of hours yesterday filming a lot of this stuff. So don't worry if you look at the pictures and go, I don't know what that's supposed to do or how to do that. These will be in video clips, which will be uploaded. Squat is another one that's a very, everybody has been to the toilet within the last 24 hours, I hope. And getting up off the toilet without having to use handrails or push yourself up is one of the aspects of the squat pattern. It's getting up off the sofa without having to struggle. And it will also help offset things like the weaknesses in the legs, tripping up, any kind of weakness or wobbliness in the legs. Pushing, that's everything from pushing into an overhead locker, pushing a trolley. I'm using the airport. You can see where I've been over the last, all my analogies, airplanes and airports. And pushing, trolleys or strollers along, or a lawnmower. Lunge is basically like an exaggerated walk. Think of like the 40 Towers. I highly recommend you do that in an airport as well. I got cleared straight through security. They were like, let him through. So it's an important one because also, and you're all going to be classic example, I'm not having a go, but you're all going to be sitting a lot today. So you're going to be in hip flexion. Your hip flexors are getting tight. Your hamstrings are shortening as we speak. So one of the things that's going to happen is that these areas get tight. So when I see somebody who's very elderly and they're walking and really, shuffling, you're never judging, you never value judging on that. That is somebody who's had a lot of micro insults to their posture over years. They didn't know. It's just a little postural insult followed by another little postural insult. And suddenly you're like, and you say, why can't you take a bigger step? Because I just can't. Everything's tightened up. So the beauty of a lunge is it's also unilateral. So it's one limb at a time. So if you say, my left leg's strong as everything, but my right is quite wobbly and weak, that is a great way of doing it. So a lot of stuff that I do with Vince is single limb. And carry. Just how do you do it? Just carry heavy stuff. Set up a bag that is really heavy, and you can walk with 2 bags, and that will improve your grip strength. Or if you want to work your core, a really heavy bag on one side, because it's working your core in a real world scenario, not through crunches and doing all this that's going to ruin your back. You're actually going to be doing a core exercise in a functional way. Because if you think about it, if this bag's really heavy and my core's not working, I'm going to be walking around like that. Okay, so just by keeping myself nice and upright, I'm going to be stabilizing through my core muscles in a real world way. I'm all about the real world. Let's not do exercises just for vanity. Who's got the time? I haven't. So the Russian method. Now we're on to the hot stuff, people. So this is another one that you might want to take a photo of, or I'm sure the presentation will be available. But I found this years ago through a strength coach called Pavel Satsulin, and it really changed my thinking of training. One of the things that a lot of you might be mulling over is, oh God, exercise sounds like, you just imagine me there with a baseball hat on going, 5 more reps, come on, you can do this. Oh my God, I feel, because we've all watched The Biggest Loser too much. Do you know what I mean? Come on, you're a weakling. That's not how we train people in the real world. It's not productive and it's not useful. The Russian strength training method is this. You take an exercise. For example, let's work on one that I do a lot with Vince, push-ups on the staircase. Let's say Vince can do 10 reps until he literally face plants. He's like, I literally cannot do one more, and he's just there. You only do 5. Let me repeat that. You only do 5. So you go, so hold on a second, the most I can, 10 reps, you are only going to do half of that at most, but you're going to do lots of fives. So I would say 3 to 5 times during the day. So what I mean by that is you wake up in the morning and you do your 5 push-ups on the stairs. You have a coffee, eggs Benedict. Once again, I'm speaking for myself here. And then, take a call from a friend and then do another 5. So what's the rest period? As long as you want. And so you can pass this out across the whole day. You do not have to do it. People are like, oh, it's a workout. Come on, you got 20 seconds. Go, go, go. It's not like that. You're going to take your time on it. Multiple sets. And I would recommend for you guys 1 muscle group per day because you're busy. You've all got lives, families. Like, how much time do you want to, if you want to put more time into this and do more body parts, happy days. But I'm trying to be realistic. So maybe Monday you just say, I'm going to work on push-ups today. I'm going to do 25 push-ups. I can't tell you how proud I am of Vince. When I see the stuff that he does now, it's incredible. But it's not because of anything I've done. I'm just the GPS. I'm just sending him, giving him the directions. He's the driver. He's doing it. If he didn't, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. But the point is that it's just that law of repeated endeavor. Do it again and again. Okay. So, no need to exhaust yourself. The way we're going to do this, one day, for example, squats. One day, upper body. I would alternate them. Why? Because if you do wake up and think, I feel quite stiff, you don't want to work the upper body again, because I've got a pet theory that amyloidosis, because it's so inflammatory and it's problematic in that respect, bringing up too much lactic acid and overworking areas, I just think you're not going to have that recoverability. It's just my pet theory. I've got no scientific evidence, just, being in the field for all these years. That's my thinking on it. So I would do upper body, lower body, upper body, lower body. Like the icing on the cake of this, that's the cake, are your big motor movements. Your lunges, squats, push-ups, some sort of heavy pull. If some of you are TRX, it's that, like it's strapping webbing and you can row yourself up on, or just a band. All of these things will form the big crux of your movement. These are the ones that we had earlier, that 6 set of movements. Those are the big ones. But we're sprinkling on the top corrective exercise. And on that, I am going to veer slightly away from don't do too many reps, because these exercises are for muscular endurance, not for strength. They're for your posture, okay? You don't have to be strong to hold this position. You just have to have muscular endurance to hold it. So what I would argue is those ones you need to do more of, but we're going to hit those in a minute, and I'm going to show you some of those exercises. So I just made a note on a piece of paper just before I came in. What I wanted to really distinguish was you've got your big hitters, okay? Your lunge, your squat, your hinge, your push, your pull, okay? Those are the ones that you really want for your day-to-day strength activities, like just to get you through the day productively. Then you've got stuff to rectify posture, all of these things need to be addressed, okay? Because otherwise you're putting yourself in line for injury. So I want to go through things. I'm going to nip through the exercises only because I've talked for a long time, but also all of this is going to be available on YouTube. And I think that looking at it as a video clip will be far more productive than watching it just, as a picture. You're going to look at it and go, what am I supposed to do there? And I'll spend 20 minutes explaining it, and that's all on the clips. I explain the exercise, why it's important, what it does, how to set it up, everything, including even how to attach the bands. So you don't need to worry about any of that because we've covered it all. So condensing this down, focus on one exercise a day. Perfect technique, none of this, I can't do any more. If you're doing that, then you've done way too many. Frequent. The law of repeated endeavor is your friend, okay? You want repeated exposure to the exercise to get the correct effect. Stay fresh. Being sore, waking up, going, I can hardly move, is not a badge of productivity, okay? And fluctuate. If you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you've got. What I mean by that is you need to change it. So maybe one day go, I think I can do 1 push-up on the floor. Normally I do it on the stairs. I can do 5 on the stairs, but I can do 1 on the floor. Well, then maybe do lots of 1s. Maybe come down a step and do 3s. I'm using the push-up again as an example here. But maybe you're going to do 3 repetitions because it's harder for you because you're low down that step. Does that make sense? So I'm trying to give very complex ideas of periodization in a very straightforward way. Just don't keep doing what you're doing. The best program for you is the one you're not currently doing. You might think, well, that's a bit cryptic. Or, what I'm saying is that your greatest adaptations are to what you're not exposing your body to currently. So, but does that make sense, by the way? I suddenly realize I'm coming across as these very cryptic ideas. Is everybody happy with that so far? Yeah? I'm not speaking too quickly. There he is, the man, the legend himself, Vince Nicholas, being tortured by me laughing behind the camera, him feeling very, very unhappy. So this is a band pull apart. This is one of the exercises for posture. It's very much designed to improve your scapular retraction, which is just a flash way of saying it pulls your shoulder blades back, keeps you nice and upright. So I'm going to put your hand up if you want me to stop, but this is all stuff that's going to be on video. This is all stuff that is going to be, I think the presentation is going to be available as well, is it? Yeah.
The presentation will be available, everything, and it will be sent to you.
Perfect. So it gives me time to take more questions rather than, spend. Okay, so that's cable face pull, wall slides. That's a favorite. It's a Poliquin step up. That was my mentor. He developed that exercise. These are all phenomenal for improving your strength and stability. I can't emphasize that enough. Like, I reference him in the video clips, but there's a guy called Ben Patrick. He's also known as the knees over toes guy. He trained with the same coach as me. He had horrific, they called him old man knees when he was like 12. Horrific knee pain. He could hardly walk. Some days he would have to crawl out of bed. Watch him now on YouTube. Watch him now on Instagram. I highly recommend everybody because he's very giving of his time. He puts a lot of very good stuff. If you've got knee issues, knee rehab that you need, or just wobbly legs and you just feel that his site is very, very good. I've nabbed a lot of stuff. Well, it was the same stuff that I'd learned, but he's definitely advanced it along the way. Yes, it's Ben Patrick, and it's the knees over toes guy. Everybody's got to have a nickname. I wasn't that original. I just came up with Alan Levy PT. So all of these on the video clips, and they're all designed. Just very quickly, the main things that I'm looking at, going back to that first picture of the amyloidosis patient and the issues around it, are if you're slouched, getting the shoulders back. If you're here and very rounded, strengthening you in that position, what we call external rotation, making you really, really bulletproof in the end ranges of movement that can be problematic. Knees, you've got a muscle called the VMO. Should be that teardrop-shaped muscle there. It's basically responsible for the way your knee tracks. So a lot of these exercises are designed for that. So when you go to the garage and the guy goes, yeah, it's going to cost you, and you're like, oh, what? Yeah, 3 new tyres. And you think, oh, why? What's wrong with them? It's the tracking. That's the problem. So you don't want to be in the garage because that's an orthopedic surgeon looking at your knee going, you're going to need a replacement. So the thing is, all these exercises are to help with correct that. That's another one for the hips and the glute medius. That's the muscle of the outer hip. It helps stabilize it. And also, like I was saying, when the knees drop in, that helps pull the hip out slightly, or the musculature of the hip, to draw the femur into better alignment. There's Vince doing a push-up on the stair. Now, this is how impressive it has got. Vince just did this as a demo. When I train him, I get the black resistance band, which is one of the hardest resistance bands. I loop it over his shoulders. Like that's not enough. He then lowers himself, and this is another aspect I wanted to touch on briefly because it is important. And he'll hold it there with his nose hovering over the step for between 3 and 5 seconds, and then push himself away again. That takes incredible motor control. It takes a lot of strength and resilience, okay? And Vince would be the first to say, in terms of his amyloidosis journey, he's been hit with so many of the issues. It's not like we're talking pacemaker, liver transplant, peripheral neuropathy. So he has not had it easy, but this hopefully gives everybody that motivation that this is what you can all achieve, and it's never too late to start. That's a great question. Yes, somebody's mentioned that to me. They said there are not that many stairs in New Zealand. I was like, that's my whole program gone out the window. No, I was like, oh my God. I would say any fixed solid object like a sideboard, a sofa. If it's a sideboard and it's still cutting into your hands, maybe put a small thin pillow over it. That's not going to slip, but to protect your hands. it is a little. The beauty of a staircase is that you can really start progressing it. So like we're down. Vince will be like, "Didn't we use the other stair the other day?" I'm like, "Yeah, that was your last week. This week we're lower." He's like, "Oh god." So you want to progress the exercise. Sometimes you're just going to have to take big jumps. So you might have a sideboard and then another sideboard that's a lot lower. But then what you do is you go, I got up to 5 really comfortably there. We'll now do 2. Do you see what I mean? So that's where you're doing this kind of constant wave of training. How do I fix the strap? Yeah.
How do you fix the strap?
Good point. Actually, we got really technical with this. We ended up getting a bit of kitchen roll, the cardboard bit, and feeding the strap through there so it would sit comfortably on his shoulders. Whip it back like a backpack, and then you have it running across your back like that. So your hands are there, and then you're doing the push-up that way.
So you squeeze it back.
So yeah, basically think of the band as running across the back of your shoulders, and then coming around and looping over your hands. And so what happens then is, as you can imagine, the loading on that is that as you lower, it gets easier because the band gets slacker. As you push away, the band gets tauter, and then that makes it a lot harder. So, it's just one of. I like bands, by the way. They'll be probably about $50 on Amazon. The brand I recommend only because it's the one I use is Tom Shoe. I've got no affiliation with the company. They just last a long time. And they come with a whole different set, so you can really start to play around with different loading. And they're very gentle on the joints. If you think of it, a dumbbell, like let's say you're doing a dumbbell curl, it's like it can really be quite a forceful option on the joints. Bands are much more forgiving, and I found them really flexible. During COVID, they were a godsend because I was coming up with all sorts of crazy stuff, as you will probably see on these slides. Does that cover that? So yeah, in regards to stairs, just find something that's fixed and immovable. So if I was looking around this room, let's say you're really starting out, maybe get it going from this sort of thing, maybe then on the table, not this table, but a table, kitchen bench, work surface, something like that, yeah. And you can even get these little glove pads that go over your hands that protect them. So if you're like, oh, that's really biting, because you're on the edge, for example, then that can be really beneficial. Grip strength. I'm such a keen advocate for this. I've done martial arts for the best part of my life, and anybody who likes Bruce Lee knows he had great forearms, and the forearm is the linking point to the fist and the arm, and the body, that connection. He did a lot of forearm work. For people with peripheral neuropathy, this is an absolute must, okay? I will get started. The sooner the better. There's a lot of correlative evidence out there that people with stronger grip strength have better longevity. So it's highly correlated with long life. I think even more so than blood pressure, which is really impressive. So if you've got good grip strength, it means you're going to live longer. And I think I don't think that's causative. I don't think doing grip strength training is suddenly going to make you live up to 100. But I think it's a factor of your lifestyle. If you think of a chippy or a plumber, they might have big forearms because they're active all day. So does that make sense? But the key to grip strength training is it's not just the grippers. Okay, you also need pinch grip. So that's a little bit more dexterity. So you can get these hubs, which are here, which you just sort of pinch and then have to hold. Well, you can do it with anything that's heavy and thin, and just hold it there. Then you've got support grip, which is basically carrying your shopping out of the car. That's support, and that's the one we tend to do the most of. If you're really struggling with that fine dexterity, does anybody know what I mean by the Chinese medicine balls? They're like these little balls that are beautiful and ornate. They make a little tinkly sound, and you just rotate them around, and you're trying not to have the balls touch one another. They're kind of old Chinese martial art tool, and so highly recommend those. And also you want to work the opposite muscle, so you're not getting super tight there. You want to work extension, which are basically those, and you wrap them around your fingers and then just extend your fingers out like that. So you're working the extension portion of the movement as well. You always want to work agonist and antagonist, both sides.
It's actually nothing to do with amyloid, but I've got osteoarthritis in my fingers. Would these sorts of things be okay because of the wear and tear of osteoarthritis?
Yes, I would argue yes. Just what you want to do is not overdo it, and also if there's an inflammatory response where you think, oh, it's got worse, then maybe just dial it back. But yes, definitely any strengthening exercise, because it's always the same thing. If you don't use it, you lose it. So I wouldn't go too gung ho with it, but certainly, for example, there are you can get these very squishy ones that I got my son for his 15th birthday, which are like a donut, and and that would be ideal for you because it's gentler. The metal grips, you might think that might hurt, whereas the spongy ones, and they come as usually as sets, so you can get, you can start to progress up. Progressive overload. Has anybody ever heard the Greek legend of Milo's bull? No. Okay. Basically, Milo gets a bull calf as a child. What a birthday present his dad gave him. He's like, there you go, son, is a bull calf. He's like, okay, thanks, Dad. And he carries it on his shoulder. And as he gets older, he carries the bull on his shoulder, and it gets bigger and bigger until he can carry this. And he becomes this, this legend of strength in Greek mythology. That's the principle behind strength training. It's progressive overload. You just want to keep improving and adding weight to what you're doing. You don't want to just stick with what you're doing all the time.
Get so strong on the right side when he never carried it.
You've hit on corrective exercise. That's why we need to make sure. I would say to Milo, listen, every day change the side of the ball that you're carrying, otherwise you're going to end up looking like that. Good point. Yeah, this is why elite sports people have the biggest differentials. Like, you look at them and they really can be disproportionate because they're so powerful on one side and not the other. But that's a great point. Yeah, don't go carrying your bull calf on one arm is the point of that. Right, breath work. I'm going to touch on this very briefly because I was doing this just this morning. I'm a huge advocate for something called the Wim Hof technique. Anybody familiar with it? Okay. Basically, Wim Hof is a Dutch kind of adventurer. He's been very famous for cold exposure, for going like climbing up Kilimanjaro in a pair of Speedos, and breath work. The reason I bring this up is because where there's inflammation in the amyloidosis aspect, Wim Hof technique can be very beneficial because it's been shown in clinical studies to actually reduce the twin cytokines, these inflammatory markers of IL-6 and IL-8, and improve IL-10. So basically, there's less inflammation in the body. It also alkalizes the bloodstream. It also increases your respiratory capacity, your ability to, your carbohydrate tolerance, your CO2 tolerance. Sorry, I'm thinking about lunch. So if you want to look into that, you can just Google it on YouTube, and he's got a lot of videos. He's actually got the breathing app, so you can follow it along. But it's something I've done every year, every day since COVID, and it's been really very beneficial. It can be quite calming. It's very good for rebalancing your neurotransmitters, which are the little cell signalers that control mood. So if you've got mood-based disorders, potentially anxiety-based or depressive, it can be beneficial for that. So highly recommended. It's Wim Hof, and there's a lot of stuff on him out there. Tai Chi as well, very good for joint mobility, synovial fluid in the body, improving joint mobility. If you follow Chinese medicine, and I do personally, but I'm not going to force that on you guys, it's the idea that all disease is basically blocked or slow-moving or fast-moving energy, and the breath combined with the movement is designed to enhance the flow of energy throughout the body. Even if you don't believe that, it's a phenomenal paradigm for improving balance. I think people who did Tai Chi were 75% less likely to suffer falls, so that's a good reason to do it. Ideally, if you can work with a fitness professional, I'm not available to come over too regularly. So much as I'll be flattered, I think my girlfriend will kill me. Yeah, that's a moot point. When she found out how much it cost to come over here, I think that was the mitigating factor. So setting some sort of accountability is really important. Reminders, diaries, apps, trackers, it will just encourage you to be much more accountable to yourself, and it helps with tracking progress as well, which is, I can't emphasize how important that is. People go, oh yeah, well, I remember it. No, you won't. And it's nice to look back a year later and go, I can't believe I still keep, wow, okay, I hit that lift and I bettered what I did 3 years ago. It's important. It's not just vanity, it's progress. Okay, I'm actually not done too badly. I'm only 3 minutes over, which is impressive by my standards. So I'm going to touch briefly on supplementation. I know that there's going to be a much more detailed talk on nutrition and supplementation later, so I'll be very interested to hear that, to see where it combines with my thinking. Personally, we've got epidemic of vitamin D deficiency. In the UK, the doctors won't even bother giving you a test because they just go, well, everybody's deficient. So I would probably, it's difficult to say in New Zealand because I don't know how much sun exposure you guys get, but general recommendation is about 75 international units per kilo of body weight. Generally speaking, for the average person, it works out about 5,000 IU, which sounds like a lot, but actually, vitamin D, the reason I'm such an advocate for it, it affects everything. Every gene in the body has a receptor site for vitamin D. And so whether it's obesity or cancer or blood pressure or diabetic complications, vitamin D has been shown to help. At the beginning of COVID, I had a lot of clients saying, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" I said, "I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I can only tell you what I'm taking, but I'm taking a lot of vitamin D." And actually, it came out afterwards that was very, very effective against COVID. So when I got COVID, it was very mild. So vitamin D. Now, the key thing is, and you'll see, test. Please, guys, don't guess these things. Testing is really, really key. Get a blood draw, and when you have the blood draw, it will be able to tell you your levels, and then you'll be able to optimize it yourself. So a lot of the times, doctors may say, you're fine, but their levels might be for the average. Well, the average, as my mentor used to say, is Homer Simpson. So nobody wants to be Homer. So sometimes you want to go for optimal, especially if you've got an autoimmune condition. I would be shooting more for 50 to 70 nanogram per milliliter than sometimes the levels that they give. And these are safe levels. I haven't plucked them from nowhere, but they will ensure that you're on the upper level and you get all the health benefits. Omega-3s, fish oil, big advocate for that. Once again, affects everything: brain health, eye health, joint health, heart health. They've just done studies that show that in significant doses it's anabolic. So I know it sounds like steroids, but it's just fish. It basically increases muscle mass. So at high enough doses, you get increases in muscle mass. What's not to love about that? So an omega-3, you want to get a good quality one, not from the cheap stores, and I would look for a high level of EPA and DHA. Those are the two active constituents. Probably about, off the top of my head, 600 milligrams of EPA, 400 milligrams of DHA would be good. Some good brands, once again, I'm not affiliated, but Nordic Naturals, Designs for Health, Metagenics are all really reputable. So for vitamin D, it will be 75 IU times your body weight in kilos. I'm 80 kilos, so that would be 6,000 international units. But I take 5,000. That's a good question. You see, we have got, in the UK, sunscreen. We've got awful weather. So everybody saw me in a T-shirt and went, "Why are you in a T-shirt?" I'm like, this is summer over in England. But the point is that I don't know how much sun exposure you guys get. So that's why I said test. Yeah, so, I mean, there are private tests available. I mean, in England, you just get a little pack. It's a pinprick test. You send the blood draw off. They send it back. And then you can work it accordingly. But one of the things I think when I was speaking to Kate about this, she said to me, "So what, you'd recommend vitamin D on top of multivitamin?" I said, "Oh, yeah." I did a little experiment last year around May time. I stopped taking my vitamin D because I thought we're coming into spring, and I retested it. My levels have never been so low. They just went, because that's the English summer for you. So once again, I don't want to speak for what the weather's normally like and how long summer is, etc., and how hot it gets. But I would just test. And maybe your levels are fine during summer. We'll start taking it during winter. But it is important to test, because I'm not one of these people who's like, "Oh yeah, you can take loads." You can take enough to make you unwell. You don't want that. So just testing regularly is quite a good way of ensuring that you don't come a cropper. The same is with the omega-3. So that I would have, a good one would have 600 milligrams of EPA. So for that, think inflammation. And 400 milligrams of DHA. For that, think sort of eye and brain health. So for children, for example, you can only give them DHA because they haven't got the metabolic processes to convert to EPA. So that's, I credit that with the fact that my son's so smart. Not good parenting, just lots of fish oil.
How do we measure
No, no, not at all. No, that's a smart question. It's only come into play in recent years. What I would say is that if I was in the UK, I would just send you to a website called Thriver. I haven't had enough time to check in New Zealand.
Costing?
Sorry?
What were
No,
you?
I'll take you with me. I would say the test kits would be up to about, let me think, 400 New Zealand dollars maybe. But you can make bespoke kits. I think that, I mean, if I get a chance, I'll have a look. I would assume that there would be things like that available over here.
Is this for the vitamin D test? You can go to your GP and request for it, but it is not covered under, you have to pay out of pocket. Just on the subject of testing for the omega-3, I would say that why don't you go to your GP and ask and clarify whether there's actually a test that can be done. I could be wrong. A lot of things may have improved. So go to talk to your GP, ask whether that can be done, and if it's covered. Okay? So I never want to take no as an answer. Like, explore yourself and see what your options are.
I suppose sitting here is making a judgment on the difference of what has been good and what hasn't been good. So you've got to have a starting point of what you're having or what you've got before you can make a judgment on what you've improved or not improved.
Yep. Totally agree. Totally agree.
I just did a quick Google, sorry, just over here. And Awanui Labs have a website called mytests.co.nz. So it's something you can click on and you can select whatever tests you want to have done. So it is user pays. And I think the full health one is about the $400 you were mentioning. But just because it's with Awanui Labs, I'm figuring it's obviously going to be quite reliable for people.
So yeah, I also recommend folate and B12 for nerve function, and DNA and RNA synthesis are basically that DNA replication process. And also because there's so many nerve issues with amyloidosis, I recommended this to Vince years ago, and it seems to have really benefited him. So once again, it's one of those ones that's very, very individualized. But I'm going to come on to kind of all one-size-fits-all template in a second, even though I'm not a big fan of that. I thought some people might be like, well, give us a template that we can work with. Another one which I'm a big fan of, and I've been taking like crazy for this presentation to ensure that I remember everything, is something called lion's mane. And once again, they did clinical studies on this that showed that it actually improved cognition in Alzheimer's patients and actually regrew the myelin sheath as long as people kept taking it. So, there's a lot of research. And I can say, I know this is anecdote, you've got to be careful, it's not a scientific study, but the stuff that I was just talking to Jamie yesterday, and she said, oh, where did you stay when you were in Kuala Lumpur? And I went, oh, it's Jalan Connaught. I thought, Jalan, that was like 30 years ago, and I have not thought about that since that day, and it just came back. So suddenly recall, things like that will come back quite rapidly. So I'm a big fan of it, and it's very safe. Another interesting thing, while we go back to vitamin D, there was research that showed it actually stopped and reversed amyloid plaque depositions in the brain. But this was on Alzheimer's patients. But what's not to love about that? I would say that might well be something worth looking at. Yeah, that was vitamin D. It stopped the aggregation. Oh, lion's mane mushroom. Lion's mane. Yeah, I think the mane, because that's what the fungus looks like on a tree. It looks like a lion's mane. Yeah, and actually, it's funny you say that because there's a company, it comes out of New Zealand, called Dirty.
Yes. We take lion's mane as well. And prior to this year, actually, a couple of years, I always like to see where it comes from. So back then, a lot of them came from China, and I was like, no, I'm not getting that. But New Zealand, we grow our own mushrooms. So there are a lot of products online that you can source locally.
I think the brand, because I looked it up before I came here, Dirty, I thought it was playing on words, is a very good brand. It's one I've been using myself, and I think that's here. So that would be the one I'd go to straight away, is a recommended one. So yeah, sorry about the typo, that wasn't me. I'm blaming somebody else for zinc. That's the German version. It's zinc. So basically, a good place to start would be a good multivitamin. Extra vitamin D, as I said, fish oil, magnesium, and zinc for the immune system. So, like, if you were like, oh, I just want a good one-size-fits-all template that I can't go too far wrong with. Why magnesium? Magnesium is important for the Krebs function, the cycle of energy production in the body. It's actually a calmative for the muscle and nervous system, improves sleep. I've been taking it like crazy. It's not worked as I'd hoped, but but it really helps with things like muscle recovery. For anybody who's got the type 2 diabetes, things like insulin management.
Sorry, can
No,
I ask
fine.
a question?
Yeah.
Just with supplements, does that interfere with medication?
Brilliant question, which is why I would always consult with the doctor. Every time I've introduced something to Vince, I've said to him, look, could you speak to your cardiologist? So there was one that I recently got him on coenzyme Q10, which is for mitochondrial production, very good for heart health. But I'm thinking, with a pacemaker, so I never recommend anything unless I've done my due diligence or deferred to somebody who knows more about it. But a lot of time, I don't know if this is good or bad. They'll say, yeah, fine, just try it. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, it wants to be quite bespoke. So I'm reluctant to give but I thought some people might want, give me a little template that I can work with. That's quite safe. And I would argue that there's, unless you're going in for surgery, in which case stop taking fish oil about 2 weeks beforehand because it is a very potent blood thinner. Or maybe you're on statins. Some of you might be on statins. It might be worth having a word. But generally, very, very safe, very effective. I've been recommending these for a lot of years and not had any issues or interactions.
If you consider you've got a good diet and it covers all that stuff, was there any need for that? Because in New Zealand, a lot of us think that we've got good diets. Why do
You've
we
got a
need-
lovely diet
why
here.
do
I was eating last night. I tell you what.
It's a big argument out there.
No, you know what? That's a brilliant question, and it's also a pushback that I often hear. Once again, I'm just speaking for England, but we've got significant soil degradation. The levels of zinc and magnesium in the soil are not what they were 20 to 30 years ago, okay? Mass-produced factory farming, etc., has really placed a toll. So my personal argument would be magnesium, very difficult to get from foods unless you're eating organically. And also remember that these are supplementation. It's supplements. I'm not saying that it takes the place of a healthy diet. I'm saying it's an additional. So if you came to me as a client and you said, yeah, I feel generally all right, my sleep is terrible, first thing I'm thinking of is maybe getting you on magnesium glycinate as a good option. And 99% of the time, you come back the next week and go, oh my God, keep that stuff in stock. I haven't slept that well in 20 years. So it's not because of a magic property. It's because you're so deficient in it. Same with vitamin D. We've got poor weather in the UK, I'm speaking for. So we tend not to have such great, sun exposure. Fish, coming onto sort of, EPA, you'd have to eat a hell of a lot to get a therapeutic dose. So there's a difference between getting an optimal, eating it regularly, and an optimal dose where you're like, my elbow feels better, my joint function, my eye health is improved. That would be a therapeutic dose. And I would argue that it's very, very difficult to obtain through a normal diet. So that's where the benefit. And also, you've got to remember that the fish may have heavy metal contamination. There's a lot of other things at play, PCBs and all this sort of stuff that you can't pronounce, that unfortunately is the end product of what we've been doing to the planet for such a long time. So I would argue that there is a definite place for supplementation even with a healthy diet. But you may want to pare it down then. It may not be necessary, for example, to have a multivitamin. But I would, for everybody, I'd say vitamin D and fish oil, like if you put a gun to my head, because it has such a potent effect on all genes and all these, whether it is eye health and all these other mechanisms. In conclusion, one of the things I love about my job and I'm most proud of is that I have the privilege of training a lot of people with some very substantial health issues, okay? And the privilege comes from the fact that what they've taught me in life is that they don't permit negative thoughts, limiting beliefs, these kind of disempowering concepts to erode their lives. And they're the most committed clients I could ever have. They turn up every day. They always bring their A game. It's sad to me that it takes a health crisis in people's lives to drive them to the gym and to make them so focused, these are aspects that are out of their control. And that's why I get upset when I sometimes see people who come to me after the sort of like 30 years and go, oh, I really need to get in shape. You're like, really? It's like an investment or a pension plan. It's like, yeah, you can save up for a pension at 50, but it's going to be a lot of hard work. If you just invested in it a little bit earlier, it would have made such a difference. So for me, the privilege of training with people who've got health conditions that were out of their control, that were, just brought upon them by, fate or chance, is a real privilege. And it's one thing I wanted to share with you is that level of commitment that gets me out of bed every day and keeps me focused on this job, and it makes it such a privilege. Thank you all for bearing with me. I hope I didn't go on too long.
Alan will still be around, so feel free to come up to him and ask him questions if you have any. Thank you, Alan. Your expertise is actually really lacking within the rare disorder space, around the rare diseases, even not rare. So I think what you're doing is very, very, very important. So thank you.
What kind of protein supplements do you get? There's so
Brilliant.
many out there.
Excellent question. Yeah, I would say definitely, because one of the things that you're going to be struggling with is that protein synthesis. Like, how much can you get in your diet? So, to give you a rough idea, could you give me an idea as to how much you weigh? 68. Okay, so you're probably looking at, a good level would be something like 140 grams of protein a day. So that's quite a lot. Okay, me, for my size, I'm probably looking at about pretty much about the same, so maybe a bit more. So my recommendations would be protein with every meal, every single meal. Like the minute you sit down and you look at your plate, that's the primary source of food there. The only caveat to that, because I always get, oh, can't you eat too much protein? Yeah, if you've got kidney issues, and you'll know, then yes, there might be a reason there. But for most people, eating double your body weight in kilos in protein is completely safe. The other thing is, sorry, to answer your original question, because I'm drifting already here, is yes, whey protein is an absolutely excellent source of protein. Whey, so WHEY, and that is highly bioavailable, and it's very effective so if you're thinking, God, I can't eat all this steak, then maybe having you think, yeah, I can, then actually maybe having a whey protein once or twice a day. If you find it gives you gas, bloating, bit of a dodgy stomach, then I would look for hydrolyzed, which is basically, it's just they sieve it out a little bit more. It's more digestible so if I get a client, they're like, yeah, I love the flavor of this, but my partner doesn't like the end result, I would then go to a hydrolyzed one, which is a little bit more fractionated and is a bit better absorbed.
When I went through my stem cell transplant last year, one of the only things I could take in while in the hospital was a protein powder, and Go Good was the one that worked the best for me. It didn't give me any stomach upset, so it's Go Good whey protein. Yeah, really, really great Kiwi brand.
Actually, you've got brilliant protein powders out here. Now I come to think of it, because in England, yeah. But honestly, one of the things that when I get any phone calls from these companies that I've always been looking for, and usually because the grass-fed whey here, now I come to mention it, is second to none. So I wanted that as a feed for my daughter when she was little. Was New Zealand. But it's very difficult to find in the UK, but easy here. So highly recommended.
She'll turn it on. Thank you. I had a stem cell transplant 5 years ago. I started at probably 70 kilos and I left hospital at 48 kilos after 5 weeks. I'll probably tell you a little bit more about it, but there was 9 months between diagnosis and transplant due to COVID. And we have a wonderful place in Newcastle called the Cadence Centre, and it's a non-profit, and it's for people that have cancer and that they have ongoing chronic diseases, basically. So I went there 5 days a week until COVID hit. They gave me an online program, and 5 days a week I lifted weights. And when I came out of hospital, I could hardly walk. But within a month, and I went straight back to the Cadence Centre, I was back walking because there was so much muscle memory from the working out beforehand that it didn't take long for me to get well. Where usually it takes a lot longer, and everybody, all my specialists said that was to do with the strength training. It's taken me a long time to get my, walking and, is it anaerobic capacity? Yeah, my anaerobic capacity back again. But I was strong and I could walk and I could, take a shopping bag. It wasn't as much as it was before, but I highly, highly recommend strength training. You don't have to be a bloody muscle builder or anything. It's just basic. All right?
Thank you. I'll pay you later. I was asked to mention creatine. Creatine is one of the most researched and safe and effective supplements you can take. Unfortunately, like with protein powders, it's got that kind of, oh, right, Gary, in the gym, these sort of monkey men wandering around with big biceps. It's nothing to do with that. Creatine is one of these compounds that is very, very safe. It's actually also recently been linked, so it will help you with gaining muscle mass. You may find after a few weeks that you gain a bit of water weight as well. So if weight loss is an issue, then it can be beneficial. It leads to an increase in lean muscle mass and a decrease in body fat. And also there's recent very compelling research to come out to show that it helps with cognitive function and also sleep. So it's very highly researched. I'll probably say the 3 supplements that are probably the most researched: creatine, fish oil, and vitamin D. Just go on PubMed, highly recommended, and just put something in.
Hey, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. One of the things that I think a lot of patients endure is the feeling of you start eating and then you feel very full or you feel sick. And so one of the things that I think us doctors are very bad about recommending is actually taking stuff to actually help push food through the stomach so you can eat more. So if you have autonomic neuropathy, which a lot of people with ATTR and AL have, what actually happens is you have this thing called gastroparesis. So the bottom of your stomach, normally when you start to eat, when the food hits the stomach wall, the stomach tells the brain, oh, I'm eating. So the brain says you need to relax. So the sphincter at the bottom of the stomach normally will start to relax so food can pass through. When you have autonomic neuropathy, that doesn't happen. That connection is lost. And so what happens is that a lot of patients will lose weight because they're not eating as much, and then they lose muscle mass. So exercising is really important, but also how do we overcome this problem of the lack of relaxation at the bottom of the stomach? There's a tablet called domperidone. It's not domperignon, I'm afraid. You can wash it down with domperignon if you have the money. But
recommended.
It's called domperidone, and what it actually does, it's a prokinetic. It pushes food through the stomach, through that tiny hole. So instead of only being able to have 3 or 4 spoons of something, you can have 5, 6, 7, or 8. And the thing is that it's better to use it regularly before you start eating rather than taking it on an ad hoc basis. So I think a lot of what Alan said is really good. This vitamin D in Australia, even though we're a reasonably sunny country, it's very, very common to have vitamin D deficiency. And so I would say 75% of my patients are taking vitamin D in the morning. I say it's like a little burst of sunshine in a pill because that's where we get our vitamin D from. And it definitely helps muscle strength and agility. So I think vitamin D is great. I think protein powder is a really, really good idea. And I often say, why don't you, just have a little protein shake before going to bed? Yes, you might feel full, but you'll be asleep, so who cares, So again, maybe your partner with, after an hour or 2, you might be letting off some interesting odors. But the main thing is that you need to make sure that you're taking in enough calories and exercising regularly with vitamin D to go and help you with your muscle mass to be brilliant. And so I think that's a really good thing to do.
Food through the stomach.
Yeah. So I would usually take it 15 minutes before you start eating. So, the main thing would be, I usually say to my patients, take domperidone 3 times a day. The moment you get out of bed, when you start thinking about heating up the soup, for lunch, that's when you take your domperidone, that's a... Did I? Look, I wishful thinking. That's right. Unless I'm with Tim Sutton.
It won't help your symptoms, but you'll feel better about them. One of the things, I just wanted to ask, do you think there'll be a place then for digestive enzymes in the case of gastroparesis? I'm thinking like HCl, amylase, lipase.
Honestly, I don't know.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know. Yeah.
Is it more the actual sphincter movement that needs to
Yeah.
be? Yeah, okay.
It's just you've got a tightened sphincter. So, you've got those enzymes. They just need to get into the duodenum to actually do it. So, it's really what can we do? So it actually helps the stomach go. And so I think it's brilliant. And a lot of people don't do it, but I pretty much put any one of my patients who are losing weight, I just make it regular. So domperidone 3 times a day, 15 minutes before eating.
Regarding creatinine, is it safe to take if you have impaired kidney function?
I would say not. With something like that, there's always one of my mentors right now is Dr. Lane Norton, and he always says, it depends. I think when we feel confident with something, you don't have an one size fits all kind of criteria. So I would say no, because I think there can be issues with creatinine build. Okay, yeah. So I'm deferring to people who know more about this than I do. Sort of generally safe, but yeah, I would say impaired kidney or liver function, best not to.
Medication, you'll be linked to a clinical pharmacologist at a hospital or somewhere like that. It's really important to ask your clinical, this is a clinical pharmacologist. It's not a chemist, all right? You must ask them about, are there any interactions with the drugs you're taking? And they will be overly cautious, and I think it's better to be overly cautious than not cautious at all.
I was just a little bit confused about when you were talking about the Russian technique.
Yes.
And tension and not fatigue. But then you talked about strength training, and because when you talked about the Russian technique, you said just do 5 press-ups, don't try and push for those 10.
Yeah.
And that seemed kind of contradicting, but...
That's a really good point, actually. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I just looked at my notes and there's one bit that I wanted to touch on anyway. So with strength training, traditionally, you're absolutely right. You would go to within about 1 or 2 repetitions of failure, but I'm just making this as applicable to people who have amyloid condition as possible and making it doable. So the thing actually you touched on there, and I'm really glad you mentioned it because I wanted to really hammer that home, is that the way you create that effect, so you're thinking, well, I could do 10, I'm only doing 5, how is this going to have a benefit, is through tension. Now, tension isn't just altering where you are on the step. For example, I'm using the push-ups again, or making the squat a bit deeper. It can be brought about by having the resistance band across you. That will create additional tension. But that brings me to one really cool point, and it's a book that I've been reading recently. I wouldn't recommend it because it's very heavy going for a strength trainer, but it's by a guy called Cal Dietz, and my mentor also worked with it. It's called Tempo. So for those of you who want to or can, if you can just stand up for me, if you can stand up out of your seat for a second. You don't all have to do it. Only if you want to and you feel comfortable. Okay. Now, so this is going to be annoying. I just want you to sit straight back down. Okay. Now, come back up. And now I'm going to count you down, and you're going to lower yourself for 5 seconds till you hit the seat. Ready? And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and sit. Okay, so did you notice, for example, some of you would have got down and then like that last bit. That's called a lack of eccentric control. The way you can make the exercises harder, sorry, this is the long way round of explaining it, is through the time the muscle is under tension. We call it TUT, time under tension. And I'm really glad you mentioned it, because I made a note of this just before I came on, and then I promptly forgot to mention it. Is the best portion of the movement that you can really, really focus on is this. So hopefully this lowering portion here. That eccentric portion is when the muscle lengthens under tension, and this is the cool bit, you're 150 times stronger that way than pushing yourself up. So by putting the tension portion through that, you get really strong. It's very good for connective tissue. So tendons and ligaments will benefit as well. And it helps you slow yourself. So for those of you who got to the bottom and then sort of went like that, you will control it all the way down and then very softly land onto your seat. And then you can really play around with it, as Vince will tell you, with little pauses. So for example, here, stop, and then lower a bit more. And it's not just to be torturous, though that is a sadistic part of me that comes out to play, but also you're stronger 15 degrees either side of the joint angle. So if you have an injury, for example, stopping here doesn't just make you stronger here, it makes you stronger here and here. So there are a lot of cool things you can work. Does that kind of answer the question? The key is tension, and it's how you create it. So when you're starting out, maybe don't have a band across your, maybe just doing the push-ups is difficult enough. But like I said, it's creating that tension through whatever mechanism you're using. And my personal preference, because it's less, doesn't require equipment, is less demanding, and I'd argue it's got better crossover to real world events, is to use that time under tension. So if you're doing a push-up, good rule of thumb is kind of lower yourself for 4 seconds, little pause at the bottom, really rethink your life choices, then push yourself back up, and you'll really find that it makes a huge difference. You know, I know people go, oh, I can do 30 push-ups. Right, do 30 push-ups with a 5-second lower, a 2-second hold at the base position, and then push up as quickly. Suddenly you can do 10. But I would argue that's a much more efficient and beneficial 10 than just, like you see guys in the gym. Does that? No, thank you. You know what? I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I would have got back up to my room and thought, no, you forgot to mention tempo. What were you thinking? So that's a really important point. If you've been making notes, do keep that in mind, because that I always tell my clients that's the kind of magic source of training. Can be really. Any other questions? I think I've exhausted everybody. Oh, can we go now?